Do you have a water? Is that yours? You want to have just in case it is extra water. There. Okay. So, welcome everyone, and thank you so much for taking the time in this very busy market time to come and see this talk. My name is Erin Robideaux Gleeson, and I'm so happy to bring together Shandiin Brown and Maggie Thompson for this talk today, titled Healing Threads, Maggie Thompson on Textile Art, Solidarity, and Community. It's been a very big pleasure working with Maggie for this exhibition and Berkeley Gallery and IAIA Museum of Contemporary Art MoCNA as a curator. And sorry, I just wrote this. To present, I'm so happy to present Maggie Thompson Interactions, which is inside in South Gallery, her first institutional solo exhibition. Interactions brings together 4 new works addressing topics ranging from structural violence and addiction to solidarity and community care. So I will introduce the speakers, and then they'll have the floor for about an hour, including some questions afterwards. So Shandiin Brown is a curator, creative, and citizen of the Navajo Nation from Arizona. She is a PhD student at in the history of art at Yale University, where she studies multimedia, Native American art, and fashion. Maggie Thompson is from Lac Ojibwe and is based in Minnesota, where she's an artist and owner of MoCNA Studios, knitwear company. Her multimedia work expands various textiles traditions, inherited ways of being and becoming. Thompson skillfully and intuitively works with both natural and synthetic materials, deriving inspirations from her Ojibwe heritage, family history, and the contemporary Native American experience. Okay. Her work has been featured in group exhibitions, recently including The Shape of Power, Stories of Race and American Sculpture at the Smithsonian, and also at the Smithsonian at the Renwick, Sharing Honors and Burdens, the Renwick Invitational. Thompson is a recipient of the Jim Denemy Memorial Scholarship, as well as grants from the Jerome Foundation, Minnesota State Arts Board, and the Native Arts and Cultures Foundation. Her work is represented by Berkeley Gallery in Minneapolis. So thank you again. Thank you again for coming.
Hi everyone, Haley Shandiin Brown Kia ani nishle bilagana bashishtin tlizlana doshiche do bilagana dishinele beshage de taisi nasha do kanake hahodzo de shigan. Thank you very much, everyone, for being here today. I just introduced myself in Diné Bazad, or Navajo. I said that my first clan is Kia'ani, or Towering House, and my third is Tlitzatlane, Mini Goats. And my family's from Coppermine, Arizona, and I live in Connecticut doing my PhD program. Maggie, I'm so excited to have this conversation. I feel like with our RISD connection, there's always kind of been, collaboration on my end. So I'm really excited to be here. And I also want to say a big ahiyahet to IAIA and to IAIA MoCNA. Really appreciative of having this space and being invited. I used to be a student at IAIA. I used to work at the IAIA collections, and I used to work at IAIA MoCNA, so I'm really happy to be back. Maggie, would you like to introduce yourself in your own words?
Bonjour, hello. My name's Maggie. I'm enrolled at Fond du Lac, but I grew up in the Twin Cities. My background is in textiles, and I've been doing art since I was a kid. Both my parents were artists. My dad was a musician, and my mom was a painter, so I've been very fortunate to grow up with that my entire life. I got my BFA from Rhode Island School of Design and in textiles, and moved back home shortly after and started my arts practice there.
Yeah, and for context, I used to be the assistant curator at the Rhode Island School of Design for Native American art. So it's great to see Native, Indigenous people at RISD, and I'm excited for our conversation today.
Me too.
So starting off, I think I want to talk about, I'm really into textiles. I'm sure people in the audience are too. So your practice, it really plays around a lot with textile-based media and, talks a lot about personal as well as social and political inquiry. Where has this kind of like drive to go and inquire in these pretty serious topics or personal topics, where does that kind of come from for you?
Yeah, I mean, I guess that inquiry really started when I was young, growing up with my mother who worked in hospice. I became aware early on of the fragility of life and the weight of caregiving and grief and the emotional labor that often goes unseen with that. And at the same time, I was hearing stories about my dad's past, his experience in boarding schools, the trauma he carried, and the way those histories continue to affect our family. But it was my mom who was telling me these stories, and my dad was a very private man, so I didn't hear those firsthand. Even as a kid, I was questioning fairness and standing up for others. I remember in 5th grade, we were told we had to go outside for gym class, and it was raining, and a friend of mine really didn't want to. So I thought she had the right to say no, so I started a strike and got the whole class involved. Looking back at that moment, that moment was small but very significant. Our teacher was really proud and sat us down and had like a conversation about the importance of what just happened. And I think that it showed me how even small acts of resistance could challenge authority and advocate for others and demand care. And then a few years later in high school, that sense of injustice hit much harder. A friend of mine got pregnant early, and her father told her that she couldn't keep the baby and that it wasn't her choice. And, it was really heartbreaking and frustrating. And after, her feeling her emotions and being a really close friend, I felt really angry. It was the first time I created a print in response of an image of a woman bleeding with the words, "He told me that it wasn't my choice and that I couldn't keep the baby." So that was the first piece, I think, that I used art to process and speak out against injustice. And it was emotional, immediate, and necessary. And it showed me the power of visual language in giving voice to what goes unheard. Yeah.
And I also feel like as Native women, as matriarchs, there's also always kind of that desire to fight for those who maybe are in particular situations where they can't.
Yep.
And just be an ally.
Yep,
Yeah.
exactly.
And I also see that in the work. And if you haven't had a chance, please go check out the show. It's right across. We will be talking about specific pieces, though, and they will be on the screen.
Yep.
So, Maggie, my next question is your first institutional solo exhibition. Can we get a round of applause? Major. All of these works that are in the show were made in 2024 and in 2025. Mm-hmm. So can you share with us kind of more about your process making these works? Is everything take on a similar process? Is it unique? And thank you for sharing that story, like about your younger inspirations, because I think that really makes a lot of sense with the work we see.
Yeah, I mean, so for me, the process of creating new work, it always starts with something personal, usually a memory, a conversation, whether it's a song lyric, something visual or a moment that just sticks with me, something I've witnessed in community or a larger issue I feel the need to respond to. And then from there, I spend a lot of time just reflecting and researching and writing and drawing. I started in architecture, so I have a background in drafting, so a lot of my sketches are more in draft form or have like diagrams with words and definitions and feelings and colors and materials. And a lot of the time I just sit with the emotion or tension behind the idea before I even begin to touch materials. And some pieces come together quickly, are more responsive, and others can take months or even years to develop. So each piece has its own rhythm and its own set of needs. And yeah, and then I think when collaboration and community come into play, especially in works like the hospital gown, where other people's stories and contributions come into play, the process becomes less about the execution and more about the opacity of the piece, where creating space for dialogue, participation, and collective reflection are the most important part. So the process isn't always linear, and each piece requires its own kind of listening. And I usually let things sit until I'm ready to start working on them. I try not to force creating work. Sometimes I'll go a year or two without creating something to it. It's just something that I let happen organically or with experiences that come. And I think all that allows the work to feel honest and hopefully connective.
And I want to kind of start off first by talking, I think, about I Can't Breathe.
Yep.
Because that is, for me, when I saw the show, that was really impactful. And also the Protest Mask Project. And if you saw the promotional material for this event, you'll see them dance in the Minnesota State Capitol. Can you tell us more about those pieces and also those photographs?
Yeah, so the Protest Mask Project was started, at the beginning of COVID, I was heavily into mask making. And after the murder of George Floyd, we quickly turned into screen printing masks that state his last words, "I can't breathe." And so it was me and a group of artists from the Twin Cities screen printing and cutting out the fabric and making kits for people to take home and sew overnight. And then we would go out to the protest daily over the few weeks and pass them out. And it became kind of a way for people to participate who couldn't necessarily contribute money or go out physically to the protest. And it just became another avenue for people to get involved. And I think it also was a way to show up in solidarity. And later, more recently, within the last year, I chose to repurpose the fabric and to make the fancy shawls, which are in this exhibit. And for me, transforming the protest materials into regalia is about carrying that memory through movement. And it was also about reclaiming space, about showing that Native people are usually mostly present in these calls for justice, not just in solidarity, but because these systems of violence affect us too. And the shawls were photographed in front of the Capitol because that site holds political power. It's where decisions are made, where policies are created, and where historically Native voices have been excluded or erased. So I think bringing the shawls there was a way to turn that protest into presence, stating that we are here, that we do remember, and that we resist through beauty, through movement, and through community.
Yeah, and I think a lot, as someone who's in Indigenous and Native American studies, about Black and Indigenous solidarity.
Yeah.
And I think that this piece kind of speaks to maybe something that affected so many of us.
Yep.
And it's hard sometimes to talk about, but what I really enjoy about your work is that it's a jumping off point for these pretty serious conversations. And I think that image itself, I'd love to see that more out there in the world, because I think Native people, sometimes we are working on our own political movements, but there can always be expansion in solidarity.
Yeah.
And did you face any backlash with these pieces at all?
No, not yet.
Good.
Not yet.
Yeah, I'm like, good.
No, I haven't.
And when you're working on these contemporary art pieces that are also in garment forms, how do you kind of conceptualize and think about that? So I'm also thinking about, for Indigenous folks, how our regalia, our garments for generations have been a form of art practicing, art making, but sometimes it can kind of get shifted into craft or not maybe given as much flowers because it's on the body and maybe not hanging on the wall.
Yeah. I mean, I think garments are more than form and function to me. They carry memory, identity, protection, and vulnerability. And I think when I work with wearable forms, I'm not thinking about fashion in a commercial or trend-based sense or seen just as crafting. I'm thinking about how the body becomes a site more for storytelling, and how what we wear can speak to who we are, where we come from, and what we've been through. So the intersection between contemporary art, wearable art, and fashion, it's complex, but I see my work, I don't know, I guess it floats from both, maybe more in the contemporary art, but intentionally using the language of clothing and regalia because it's so deeply personal and culturally resonant.
Yeah, I mean, I think all of our grandmas, when they're making our outfits, are thinking about, identity, storytelling, and all of our oral traditions that's wrapped in it. And with contemporary art, here we are talking about that.
Yep.
So it's a great jumping off point.
Yep.
And this next question might be good for some of our curators and our museum professionals in the room. When you're thinking about displaying these pieces, are you thinking about mannequins, being hung like a painting, or having it on a bar? Like how, and we even see in that image, you see it flat and then you see it on the form. And I also am really into Indigenous fashion and even thinking about how that design is shifting when it's on the body.
Yeah.
How does that work for you as an artist and when you're presenting your work in a museum?
Yeah, I mean, it's something I'm trying to consider more of. I really enjoy just making the object. As Beauclé can
Spoken
tell
like
you.
a true artist.
But I mean, the way the gown is hanging in the space, like it kind of becomes ghostly. And I think I like showing it in different ways. So like I've also, and you can get up close to it. I like it floating. And then you can just, because it kind of like shows everything pretty clearly. I also really enjoyed photographing it on a friend. I feel like that made it become alive, and that was like a whole different thing. Mannequins, I like and stuff, but when it's really on when it's on a body, a real person, I feel like it's kind of magical. But I'm also flexible, so I'm like, whatever works for whatever space, yeah.
And I think like with contemporary Native art, a lot of artists are thinking about like activation and kind of like having not the artists only intervening with the work, but friends, family, community. Can you talk to us maybe a little bit more about activation or also maybe just community? Like when this piece or other shawls have been worn, like do you see that as an activation or more as just like this is part of like the artistic overall process?
An activation, can you
I'm just, that was not on the script. I was just genuinely curious. Like, I don't know, I was thinking about like people like Jeffrey Gibson saying that he's like activating spaces by having people like, so intensely like dancers interact with the work.
Yeah. I guess it activates like the object itself, I think more. And then, maybe space too. I'm just like starting to do photographs and stuff of my work in site-specific spaces. And then I think it just makes it more living. I don't know if that answers. Yeah.
No, yeah. I think now we're going to switch to a new piece. The one that we're going to talk about is the hospital gown project. In a recent Instagram post, you said that over 200 pairs of hands had touched this, and it's proof that when each person contributes even a little, which is either time, thread, a story, or memory, we can make something much bigger than ourselves. why did you choose to have 200 people work on this, and how does that collaborative process work?
So the hospital gown project is probably one of the most personal and communal pieces I've worked on. It started from my own experience with a family member suffering from alcoholism and being in the hospital when they had a near-death experience because of it. And I think the sense of isolation that can come from watching someone you love suffer, I wanted to make this a community project because I wanted it to reflect the reality that addiction touches so many lives, often in ways that are invisible or silenced. So we invited folks to contribute by hosting open studios and giving direction for folks to participate remotely. So the 200 hands, it was open, so anyone could participate, as many people that wanted to. And people from all over, friends, family, strangers, would come and bead or, send in their swatches. And some people created their own, others would start one and leave it for others to finish. And that would allow folks to contribute the time that they had. And I think our youngest was 4 years old and our eldest was in their 90s. So it was a range. And we used different, I'm describing the piece, different size beads to accommodate age and skill levels. And the different shades of blue just to allow people to send in or use whatever materials they had. And I think, so we taught them how to bead brick stitch. So it's adding one bead on at a time. It allows you to kind of slow down and regulate yourself. And, I think what mattered was the act of contributing. And even if it was one stitch, it became part of the whole. And I wanted to involve so many people because addiction isn't something that exists in isolation, as it affects families and communities and entire generations. And, when I say that we can create something bigger than ourselves with each contribution, that art can pull out that feeling of isolation so that we can bring visibility to these issues and create collectively and collectively heal. Everyone has their own way of connecting to this piece, and some have shared that by working on this project, they're using it kind of as a vehicle to start conversations within their families, and how it impacts them. For others, it's a way to grieve and bring some sort of closure to people that they've lost. And I think with that collaborative project, developed slowly and intentionally, it's also about building trust. So creating space for people to feel safe, to share their stories, and letting the piece kind of grow organically. Kind of have to let go of that control, which you kind of have to do when you're experiencing addiction, or when you're walking next to someone who's struggling with that addiction. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, I feel like myself and probably people in the audience have had family members who struggled with addiction and alcoholism, and it can be a very isolating experience and sometimes shameful.
Yeah.
And I really appreciate kind of this openness and transparency. Maybe generations before us, these just weren't talked about it, and now we are.
Yeah.
And after this talk, if you haven't seen the show, you have to go see this piece in person, because the photographs, when I saw it in person, it's amazing. And it really just pops off that wall. The photographs don't do it justice. And I also wanted to note that there was a pizza party to view the gown, which I think is really fun and sweet and exciting, and kind of this balance of yes, this is a serious topic and maybe something that is hard, but also there is community in being together. And if we could maybe talk about another piece in the show, we're gonna move on to Fuck This, which Maggie is so beautifully modeling. So with these earrings, on social media, you said natives have continuously beaded the American flag throughout history as a way to adapt to the political climate. It's seen as an act of resistance and a way to maintain cultural practices during times of conflict with the government. So can you tell us more about, the moment of inspiration for these earrings? And just as a note, I remember when Maggie posted this image on social media, and with the political climate, I was like, seriously, like, yeah, fuck this.
Yeah. I created these earrings right after the election. I was feeling anger, sadness, and frustration, just knowing that a lot of people's rights were going to be taken away, and people were going to lose their jobs, and voices were going to be silenced. I was on my way to DC for an opening at SAM, and it was really important, I think, for me to wear those earrings on opening night. And just knowing that where I would be in terms of location and who I would be surrounded with, I wanted to make these. And, I wanted to rework the national symbol of the American flag to this moment in history and who folks, and talk about who was put into power. So it's a refusal, I guess, to stay silent as an artist, to hold truth and reclaim presence, and to demand that our bodies and stories be seen, honored, and remain free. And and I think in yet another wave of legislation aimed at controlling our bodies or people's basic human rights, these policies aren't abstract for us as Indigenous women and Two-Spirit people. They're a continuation of a long history of forced sterilization, family separation, boarding schools, blood quantum laws. And so it's all connected, and it just made me really angry. Tampons, to me, they're objects that are often hidden, or, talk about your moon is often shamed and stigmatized, much like conversations about reproductive justice and women's health. And so by beating the tampons, the flag, and saying that it is not shameful and that it's just a part of who we are, and that our bodies are not yours to legislate. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think a lot about how, as Native women, coming of age is really important. For Diné people, it's our Canalda, which was, very banned and outlawed in boarding school. And so it's beautiful for me as a woman, as a Diné Navajo woman, to see these conversations happening. And I think the tampon component is great, because as women, sometimes you're like, hey, can I have a tampon? Or you slide it, just like you don't want people to see, but it's just a regular body function. And it's actually something that in our communities we were proud of women making this type of transformational change. I love rocking it on the ears. It's badass.
Yeah. Thank you.
For more of a technical angle, we talked about brick stitch with the hospital gown, and these are the peyote stitch. So for folks here, can you talk to us a little bit more about the beadwork techniques that you do? And then for this one, why was peyote stitch the one you went with?
Yeah. I think it was, as a technique I just wanted to learn and try. To be honest, I like exploring different techniques. I've done loom work and brick stitch, and I'm not sure why I pick, it just seems to work for different pieces. But for brick stitch, I think it was important, especially for community, because it allowed the people to slow down and kind of regulate their nervous system. For this, it was just because it was circular, and I've wanted to learn.
Thank you. Okay, so now we're going to talk about tug of war. And this piece does have parentheses. It's tug of war, I am not your white friends. And tug of war, what kind of brown are you? These works were made this year. And I think what I was really drawn to about these pieces is that they materialize conflicts in quite tangible form, and maybe conflicts, I guess the recurring theme that we're kind of going with here is that we don't talk about, or maybe that you don't want to bring up to your white friends certain things. So can you tell us more about the intentions and story behind these pieces?
Yeah. So I guess this, it's about the tension of being mixed. So the ribbon in the middle represents the individual. And on either side, you have a white beaded section and a red beaded section. And each rope has a different phrase placed on either the white side or the red side. And so, hold on one second. Yeah, so I'm not your white friends speaks to the kind of internalized harm I think that can exist within community, and comments that kind of critique or shame one another, or alienating, pushing us out, and pushing us towards the other direction. So you'll see that the ribbon is sitting closer to the white side, reinforcing division rather than care and community. And then on the white side, what kind of brown are you? That was stated at like a dinner with, like family, and someone came up to me and casually asked, what kind of brown are you? So, my mouth kind of dropped, and I just didn't really know how to respond in that moment. But to me, it's just like a form of racism that just reduces identity, and just strips away everything in the complexity surrounding identity. And so then that kind of like pushes me further into the Native side. So it's just a constant pull, a tug of war between those, being mixed, and never feeling like you're fully in one or the other, or feeling like you're in both.
Yeah, and as a half-white person, I also feel like what this work is doing is kind of telling that to the broader community, maybe these conflicts that, again, we just talk about with other people.
Yeah.
So do make sure you check out the piece. It's really amazing. I was impressed by the size. And can you maybe tell us a little bit more about the technical aspect of this work?
Yeah. So this one was created, we did loom work. So we have a custom-built loom to do larger pieces. The warp threads are made out of sinew, and then I believe it's preciosa beads. So it kind of has they're faceted, so the light reflects and hits them really beautifully. And yeah, I do a lot of drafting, so I work in Excel, just filling in squares to work on my patterns for hours. So we just, printed out that pattern and loomed it, and then once it came off the loom, we tied in our ends, and then we laid the rope down, and we wove more thread to kind of between like two beads on each side to kind of stitch them or zipper them together. Yeah.
Thank you. And from our conversations, my understanding is that this is an ongoing series.
Yeah.
What direction can you imagine or brainstorm that this work might take?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of probably the same format, but just different phrases. And I didn't didn't originally think of displaying them together, but maybe pairing the two different sides. I actually really liked how it's displayed here. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So we have discussed the works in the show. Again, make sure you go see the show because it is really beautifully curated, Erin. So now we're going to talk about your work with MoCNA Studio. So what has drawn you to textile-based media? How does all of these pieces that we've just talked about align with MoCNA Studio, which is described as contemporary Native identity through textiles? And what I also really admire about it is that it's also involved with education, collaboration, and exploration.
Yeah. I mean, I really love textiles just because they're tactile and personal. They mark different transitions in life. And that kind of allows me to embed complex and emotional ideas into the materials that people already have a connection with. So I think that kind of, when people enter the show, they recognize, or they recognize a material or have touched certain materials, so it creates kind of like an entry point for them into the work and the conversations I think I'm trying to evoke. And Makwa, so that umbrellas my fine art and my knitwear. And I think, hold on. Yeah, so for my knitwear, I kind of view it as wearable art, so it creates accessibility to people. And I try to promote like education about different beadwork patterns. One example is that I like to talk about is the otter track pattern, which is not pictured here, but that's okay. This is another popular design, the backbone. But it's seen in a lot of bandolier bags where an otter runs and then slides on its belly. So like talking about, patterns and beadwork in our hats and cowls. We use that. And then right now we're working on a collaboration that we just started with funding from First Peoples Fund, but we're going to be working with Ojibwe, Dakota, and Lakota artists to talk about the differences between our tribal florals, to bring more education to the general public about that. And then I think for material exploration, I also have a background in programming for knitwear, so working with an industrial machine, and that we're just starting to work on more seriously. And so I think mixing fibers and to get different structures and stuff in that sense I'm exploring, and then obviously like through the fine art as well.
Yeah, and you all in the audience can check out the Makwa Studio Instagram and the website. I have a really beautiful purple cowl that I like to wear and keeps me nice and warm and when it's cold as an Arizonian. And just as a follow-up, we have an image on the slide here of Lily Gladstone, who I'm sure you all know, but Academy Award nominated. And she's wearing one of the cowls. Can you kind of talk about that experience of her wearing it and also how it feels when people wear your work?
Yeah, so Lily reached out to me on Instagram very early on. I started my business, I think, in 2014. So she reached out saying, I think she was, what's that film festival in
Sundance?
Colorado? Yeah, Sundance. So she was reaching out to different fashion folks to see, if they could send in their work so that she could wear it during this event. And it was a credible honor. I didn't really know who she was at the time, and just watching her career take off since then has been really exciting. And it's exciting that she wanted to wear, my stuff. And I think that's one cool thing about our community, is that we always are supporting each other, lifting each other up, and carrying people forward with us.
I think about that also, especially as women,
Yeah.
Operating in spaces where maybe, historically men have been in those roles and spaces. It means a lot to kind of have female support. And I think a lot about like Indigenous feminism and sisterhood. My phrase sometimes is live and die by the sisterhood, because things don't have to be competitive, or
exactly.
We don't have to tear each other down to lift each other. We can lift each other up.
Yeah.
And we're going to kind of maybe share a little bit more about your opinions on Indigenous feminism, and how does that influence not only like your creative practice, but I'm curious as a curator also about the materials.
I think I missed this question.
Well, I guess we did talk about it a little bit with the tampons, but yeah.
Yeah, Indigenous feminism, I think just being honest and open about our experiences. I think the more that we can share with one another, I think it's important to share. They talk about like women gossiping or whatever, but it's like, I don't see it as that all the time. Like you learn stuff, things become more normalized. Maybe, a person can feel better prepared for something going through life. And I think that, I just think about that a lot, I think.
Yeah. I mean, there's like a very Instagram shared meme about how gossiping is like traditional or oral tradition.
Yeah.
But also as women, I think speaking to one another
Yeah.
and kind of leveling is bonding, and also just exactly what you said, kind of like prepares each other.
Yeah.
So if there's any young Native women in the audience, there definitely are, what is your advice to them who maybe they want to be contemporary artists, or they want to go to art school, or they want to start their own business? What would your advice be?
My advice. Yeah, I mean, it doesn't, I think, let's see. I feel like, obviously, to like continue, I don't think everything, it's not going to always happen in the timeline that you expect, and that's okay. I started my business with just a ball of yarn, knitting one hat, selling it, buying a couple more balls of yarn, selling them. So there are different avenues of building. Networking is really important, and it might not be who you expect. It might be your neighbor, someone you met as a kid. And then I think never losing, I feel like you can lose sight or get caught up in like the game or the politics of the art community. And I think it's important to sometimes just give yourself space to rest and, reconnect with yourself, your family, and that you don't always have to be creating, because I think part of being a creative is the downtime. And that allows you to, regenerate. Just one step at a time, I guess.
Thank you. And I'm curious, was beading and textile work something that was passed down from the women of your family, or was that something that you learned at RISD, or was that from working with other artists?
Yeah, so I went to a Waldorf school when I was really little, so they are very rooted in like fiber art. So that's where I first learned how to knit. Like I said, my parents were artists, but and then beading, I am self-taught primarily. I think a friend's mother taught me a little bit when I was younger, and then I did a class at the Minneapolis American Indian Center to create my first jingle dress. I think I was probably in 3rd or 4th grade. So I ended up beading my first belt then as well. So that was, I guess, my first formal exposure. And then, and then textiles. I was originally in architecture, but miss making with my hands. And RISD had a really good program, so I decided to switch. And during my final in architecture, my instructor actually held up my piece and was like, "This looks more like a textile." So I knew that I was going in the right direction. Yeah.
Nice. I did hear the Santa Fe bells ringing, so I want to check time. We're going to do public questions. So start thinking, audience members, any questions you have for Maggie. Since we kind of, briefly mentioned RISD, I did want to talk about maybe a little bit more about it. How did that influence your understanding of textiles, and how do you think RISD impacted your career?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like RISD, so it's very technique-based. So you learn everything from like hand knitting and weaving to industrial knitting and weaving, but they're really big on that material exploration. So they really emphasize that, like your homework is to go home and make, I don't know, like 10 swatches for one class with all these, as many different materials as you can. And that kind of, to me, that was like playful, like it energized me. And so I know that I really wanted to continue that practice after school. And I think, the acronym RISD, reason I'm sleep deprived, they kind of like, they teach you how to be a workhorse, which is both good and not so good at times. But they also teach you to go after your dreams and your crazy ideas, and, you have a good support network, and Their facilities are really great, so I feel like I got a lot of exposure to different things. Yeah.
Yeah, when I was working at RISD, I used to refer to it as Willy Wonka's chocolate factory.
Yeah.
Because every day really was an adventure.
Yes.
And I totally agree about working like a maniac. Like, I think when you're so fueled and motivated by the work you do, and you just see other creative people working that hard, it really does create some sort of momentum.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it was like shameful to like not be working like that,
Yeah.
which I think kind of resonates with what you were saying before about taking time to rest and absorb for future creative inspiration.
Yeah.
We're getting near to the end here, but I did kind of want to ask, what does it mean to you to be an Ojibwe woman and a contemporary artist? Like, how do you balance those two? And also, what energizes your work and what keeps you inspired?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, I use art to connect to my culture. I didn't necessarily grow up in community all the time. Like, there is a large Native population in the Twin Cities, but my mom is white, and I primarily grew up with her, and she would keep me involved in like programs as much as she could, but that was also difficult sometimes for her, and so I think to me it's a way, at least art is a way to connect back to that and learn. And then for being a contemporary artist, it's just, I don't know, I just like to speak to like common current issues, things about our past, and then also just like using techniques, traditional techniques, but with more contemporary materials, I guess.
Yeah. Okay, my last question for you. What's next after Interactions? Are there any upcoming projects or directions you're excited to dive into?
Yeah. Yes. We are currently working on a series of BDSM pup play masks, which I'm really excited about. But so there's one for an upcoming show at Hair and Nails Gallery in the Twin Cities. And it's going to include objects and photography, but so we have one that'll be fully beaded. I'm trying to figure out, working with Pat Cruz, who's a birch bark artist, to form a full mask made out of birch bark. And then, so all the flowers kind of represent different relationships that I've had in my past. And they will be worn by white men and then walked by Native women. And so it's about, the colonialism, power structures, the process of like educating a partner who doesn't share your same identity. So we're working that. I'm excited for that one.
I'm excited.
Yeah.
Audience members, we are opening for questions. So if anyone has a question, I feel like we do have a mic, so you can say it on the mic, just so everyone in the space can hear. Anyone? Question? I did ask a lot, very thorough. Anyone? Questions?
Okay.
Yes.
Hi, thank you so much. Well, to both of you, especially Maggie. Thank you for sharing so much about your practice. I'm wondering, because you were kind of emphasizing your time at RISD, because I know you guys share that in common. I'm wondering what it was like to be like bringing in your like beadwork, and I'm assuming like your knowledge of like jingle dress and traditional like Indigenous techniques into the institution, and like to what extent you had support by like faculty and staff, or was that something that you were kind of working on your own? Like, I know that being a Native artist at an art school can be really isolating, so just speaking more to that.
I guess I have one specific story that I can share, but I think, it was a different time. This was, 10 plus years ago? 2013, 12 years ago. Mackenzie also was in my class. But yeah, I think I did feel fairly isolated. I don't, I think there are maybe like one or two other Native artists. And, you know, I wasn't really beading so much at the time, but I was like exploring Ojibwe florals in a piece. And I remember being in a crit, kind of explaining this dress that I was making. And the professor told me to put a Navajo print on it to make it look more recognizable. And
More recognizable?
More recognizable. And I tried to explain to him that, you know, how tribally diverse we are and that, you know, this is authentic and like this is my culture, like I'm Ojibwe, and he just wouldn't get it. So we were just arguing and going back and forth, and I was like, maybe this is an opportunity for you to learn something. He was like, well, these look like European florals, I don't know the difference. And he just kept going. So I ended up walking out of class, and I actually didn't receive any support after. So it was like very hard. I just don't think people were talking about those issues as much. And especially professors, and, you know, kind of having more conversations about how to work with students about that. So it was a challenge. Yeah.
That was at RISD?
Yes. Yeah.
And Maggie, I'm not sure if you felt this way too, but I think for me, like at RISD, I learned a lot about critique and that it's okay for me to be critiqued.
Yeah.
As a Virgo perfectionist, it
Yeah.
can be stressful when someone redlines your writing or, you know, in your practice.
Yeah.
But I would also say on the flip is like when you're getting critiques by people who maybe aren't culturally aware,
Yeah.
a lot of racism can happen in critique. And it's just something that needs to be more talked about. And I think I tried my best at RISD. I would give crits. I would try my best to kind of not go in that direction, but it is something I think that is a great question about being in the contemporary art space, and also like what are expectations people have of you, like as a Native artist and as an Ojibwe woman.
Yeah.
The beadwork floral thing sounds like a lot, and it's cool to see that in your MoCNA studio you guys are doing that education initiative to let people know like these beadwork designs are different and they also have meaning, kind of fighting against that pan-Indian conception in contemporary art.
Yeah, exactly.
Does anyone have a question? I think we have time for one more. Yes.
As an artist who works intrinsically with textiles and has a real point of view about the world, do you have suggestions about how general people like us can be allies for people who work in textiles, who make the clothes we wear? And do you have any particular feelings about that for yourself, like what you buy to wear?
I mean, I think just supporting, I guess, I mean, you see a lot of folks like learning different techniques from different cultures, and I think just knowing knowing about that culture, I think, you know, everyone talks about supporting Native artists, like cultural appreciation versus appropriation. And yeah, I mean, it has, I'm kind of,
I think
gonna think.
Yeah, if I had to say or comment or add in, like what I'm super excited about is buying Indigenous art, but also fashion, and really like understanding and appreciating the message that it gives. And I think that's something I really value about MoCNA Studio, is that it's accessible. We're supporting these educational initiatives. And also like with Indigenous fashion, I feel like sometimes it's easy to buy earrings or jewelry, but textiles is hard. And so supporting, you know, textile artists, I feel like really understanding the pieces and then telling your friends about it is like a great way to kind of keep momentum with being informed and being educated. And I think it's really cool how you do have a contemporary art practice, which maybe not everyone can, you know, buy a piece, but they can buy wearables, and then that storytelling kind of goes on if you maybe identify with that.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I mean, I think when people ask if they can purchase my work, I'm like, of course. It's just a beanie. Like, you know, it is accessible. I think, you know, it's the artist's kind of job to say whether or not it's appropriate for people to have, like, if, whether it's meant for like the mass public or is more culturally significant. But I think, yeah, just learning about the techniques and the history of behind the pieces.
And maybe just having an open heart too.
Yeah.
To new ideas, new cultures, new ways of understanding the world.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right, Maggie. Thank you so much.
Thank you for moderating.
And congratulations on the show and everything that's next. And thanks for having me.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, guys.